In the chaotic, anything-goes battlefield of the Attitude Era, there were Titans, Austin, The Rock, Triple H. But there was also a queen, a woman who, almost by accident, became one of the most popular television stars on the planet. Her name was Sable. She was the blonde bombshell who helped redefine the role of women in WWE, a pop culture phenomenon whose merchandise sales were rivaling even Stone Cold Steve Austin himself. She graced the cover of Playboy, drawing unprecedented mainstream attention to the WWF. But what if the real story of Sable, the one the company has spent over 2 decades trying to bury, is infinitely more shocking than any storyline they ever wrote? This is the story of how WWE's biggest female star vanished at the height of her fame, launching a shocking $110 million lawsuit that threatened to blow the lid off the entire business. It's a story of backstage betrayals, toxic environments, and controversial affairs the company is still hiding from you today. How does a star that bright burn out so fast? To understand the explosion, you first have to understand the meteoric rise. Before we get into it, make sure you've subscribed and hit that notification bell, because you are not going to want to miss a single second of this story. The accidental icon. To really get Sable's impact, you have to go back to the mid-1990s. The WWF was in a weird spot, desperately searching for its next identity. Before the Attitude Era fully kicked in, the women's division was practically non-existent. Female performers were, for the most part, just accessories. Enter Rena Marlette Greek. A former model for brands like L'Oreal and Pepsi, she had zero plans for a career in pro wrestling. She married wrestler Marc Mero in 1993, and when Mero was signing his WWF contract in 1996, he brought his wife along. The story goes that Vince McMahon and other executives were so captivated by her presence, they didn't just let her accompany her husband. They gave her a contract of her own. She was introduced as Sable, initially as a valet for Hunter Hearst Helmsley at WrestleMania 12. But that didn't last long. That same night, her real-life husband, Marc Mero, rescued her, and the two became an on-screen duo. At first, the plan was simple. The beautiful Sable would be the valet to the athletic, wild man Marc Mero. And for a little while, it worked. But something unexpected started to happen. When their music hit, the roar from the crowd wasn't just for the man in the ring. It grew louder and louder for the woman at ringside. The chants of "Sable, Sable" began to drown out everything else. Vince McMahon, in particular, took notice. While Marc Mero was a solid performer, his wife had that unteachable it factor, a charisma that connected with millions watching at home. When Mero suffered a knee injury in 1997 that sidelined him for 6 months, it was a blessing in disguise for Sable's career. Instead of disappearing, WWE kept her on TV as a personality. Freed from being just an accessory, her popularity exploded. By the time Mero returned in 1998, the whole dynamic had flipped. The audience didn't see Sable as his manager anymore. They saw him as her husband. WWE, never missing an opportunity, brilliantly wove this into a storyline. Mero was repackaged as Marvelous Marc Mero, a jealous boxer who hated his wife's fame. It was perfect. Fans now had a villain to boo in her husband, who was trying to hold her back, and it cemented Sable as the ultimate fan favorite. She wasn't just a manager anymore. She was a symbol of a woman who wouldn't be silenced. This era was defined by legendary moments. At Fully Loaded 98, during a bikini contest against her rival Jacqueline, Sable revealed her bikini top was just a pair of handprints painted on her chest. The arena erupted. It was provocative, edgy, and pure Attitude Era. She was instrumental in popularizing the term diva, a name that would define the company's female performers for nearly 2 decades. The numbers didn't lie. Her merchandise was flying off the shelves. The WWF Women's Championship, which had been collecting dust for years, was brought back in 1998, seemingly just to put it on her. At Survivor Series 1998, she defeated Jacqueline to capture the title, and the crowd reaction was deafening. Sable wasn't just a wrestler, she was a mainstream star, and that's when Playboy came calling. In April 1999, Sable appeared on the cover of Playboy. It was a massive moment for the entire wrestling industry. The issue became one of the highest selling in the magazine's history, bringing a level of mainstream exposure to the WWF that was almost unheard of. She was on talk shows, in magazines. She was everywhere. On the surface, it looked like Sable and the WWF had conquered the world. But behind the curtain, a very different story was unfolding. The same popularity that made her a star was also making her a target, and the foundation of her relationship with the company was starting to crack. The poisoned locker room and backstage betrayals. As Sable's star shot into the stratosphere, the atmosphere backstage turned toxic. In the hyper-masculine, old-school world of wrestling, paying your dues was everything. It meant years of training, driving thousands of miles for little pay, and learning the craft from the ground up. Sable had done none of that. In the eyes of many colleagues, she was a model who was handed the keys to the kingdom because of her looks. This resentment wasn't just quiet whispers. You could cut the tension with a knife. One of her most vocal critics was the late Luna Vachon, a rugged, respected veteran from a legendary wrestling family. Vachon, who was tasked with helping train the inexperienced Sable, reportedly couldn't stand what she represented: instant success without sacrifice. According to reports, Vince McMahon had to warn Vachon, threatening to fire her if she legitimately hurt the company's new golden goose. The tension was so thick that Mark Miro and Luna's husband, Gangrel, often had to play peacekeeper. The heat wasn't just in the women's locker room. Many male wrestlers resented her meteoric rise. She had a no-bump clause in her early contract, meaning she wasn't required to take the physical falls that are a wrestler's bread and butter, a privilege almost unheard of. According to former WWE head writer Vince Russo and other veterans, the dislike for Sable was widespread. This wasn't just professional jealousy, it was a clash of cultures. The 1999 Playboy cover was the tipping point. Life began to imitate art as Sable's on-screen heel turn as an egotistical Hollywood persona seemed to mirror a change in her backstage demeanor. Reports from the time, including comments from talent relations head Jim Ross, suggest her fame went to her head. She was allegedly egocentric and believed she was on the same level as top draws like Austin and The Rock, an attitude that didn't sit well with those working a grueling full-time schedule, including house shows, which Sable often refused to do. Her peers saw it as a slap in the face. The tension manifested in ugly and disturbing ways. The backstage environment of the Attitude Era was known for cruel pranks or ribs. But what happened to Sable went far beyond a joke. In one of the most infamous backstage stories of the era, fellow wrestler Sean Waltman, also known as X-Pac, admitted to committing a vile act. On Sable's final day with the company, Waltman confessed in later interviews that he had defecated in her travel bag. Mark Miro recounted the story, explaining they only discovered the horrific prank when they got in their car and were hit by a rancid smell. It was, in his words, the final straw that broke the camel's back, the ultimate act of disrespect in an already hostile workplace. But the issues went deeper than personal animosity. Sable would later allege the entire working environment was systemically toxic, especially for women. This wasn't just a few bad apples. It was a culture problem. The stories painted a picture of a workplace that was, at best, unprofessional and at worst, predatory. It was this environment that led Sable to make a decision that would send shockwaves through the industry. She wasn't just going to quit, she was going to sue. The $110 million lawsuit in June of 1999, at the absolute peak of her popularity, Rena Sable Miro did the unthinkable. She walked out of the WWF, and then she filed a lawsuit aimed directly at Vince McMahon's empire for a staggering $110 million. The wrestling world was stunned. Fans were confused. How could the company's biggest female star turn on the machine that built her? The lawsuit's allegations pulled back the curtain on the Attitude Era in the most damning way imaginable. This wasn't about a contract dispute. It was about sexual harassment and dangerously unsafe working conditions. The legal documents painted a grim picture of WWE's backstage culture. Sable alleged that the company fostered a hostile environment where women were systematically degraded. One of the most shocking claims was that male wrestlers would punch holes in the walls between locker rooms to spy on female talent as they were changing. She also claimed that male wrestlers would frequently walk into the women's dressing room accidentally on purpose. These allegations suggested a complete lack of privacy and safety. Furthermore, the lawsuit claimed Sable was repeatedly pressured to perform in segments she found morally objectionable. The most prominent example was an alleged pitch for her to wrestle topless on Raw. She refused, citing the large number of children who watched. According to the suit, this was part of a pattern of WWE pushing her to do increasingly risque acts against her will. The lawsuit also formally alleged that her personal belongings had been vandalized with feces, corroborating the disgusting X-Pac story. Beyond specific acts, Sable also made claims about rampant steroid use, leading to roid rage among the wrestlers. In an interview with TV Guide, she spoke about the tempers that flared, attributing them to substance abuse. This allegation pointed to a systemic health and safety issue the company was allegedly ignoring. The WWE didn't take this lying down, firing back with a countersuit over the rights to the name Sable. The legal battle was shaping up to be a long, ugly war. But then, just as suddenly as it began, it was over. In August 1999, news broke that they had settled out of court. The final figure was never made public. Many, including Jim Ross, have speculated that it was a nuisance lawsuit, a powerful tactic designed to force WWE to grant her a release from her contract so she could pursue a Hollywood career. Regardless of the motive, the lawsuit left a scar. For a brief moment, the dark reality of the Attitude Era's backstage culture was exposed. The company managed to contain the fire, but Sable was gone, and her name became almost taboo. It seemed the bridge between them was burned to the ground. No one could have predicted that just a few years later, she would walk right back in. This story is getting wild, and we're not even close to finished. If you're finding this look behind the curtain fascinating, do us a favor and hit that like button. It really helps the channel. Now let's get back to one of the most unexpected comebacks in WWE history. The bizarre return and the McMahon affair. For nearly 4 years, Sable was a non-entity in WWE. She tried her hand at Hollywood, but breakout stardom never happened. Meanwhile, WWE had moved on to the ruthless aggression era with new stars like Trish Stratus and Lita. Then in April 2003, the impossible happened. Sable returned. The shock was immense. Why would she come back? And why would Vince McMahon, the man she'd sued for sexual harassment, welcome her back? According to her ex-husband, Mark Marrow, the decision was driven by her stalled Hollywood career. He said she called Vince McMahon herself to test the waters, much to Marrow's disbelief. As a condition of her return, McMahon made sure she apologized to key figures in the locker room, including The Undertaker and Stone Cold Steve Austin, to smooth things over. But if the return was shocking, the storyline WWE gave her was surreal. Sable was thrust into an on-screen affair with the chairman, Vince McMahon. The very man whose company she accused of fostering a sexually hostile environment was now her on-screen lover. The storyline saw her act as McMahon's mistress, antagonizing his daughter, Stephanie, and other female competitors. The decision was, and still is, incredibly controversial. It felt like a power play by McMahon, a way to publicly reclaim the narrative. By having his former legal adversary play the role of his subservient mistress on his TV show, he was blurring the lines between reality and fiction in a way many found distasteful. Decades later, in the 2024 Netflix docuseries, Mr. McMahon, Vince himself was asked about the lawsuit and the subsequent on-screen affair. His response was bizarrely dismissive. He claimed to have very little memory of the lawsuit, stating, "I don't know much about Sable in terms of the lawsuit. It's kind of a blur. All I know is she came back to work." When reminded of the on-screen affair storyline, he simply laughed and said, "With who?" "Me, God." This apparent memory lapse, whether genuine or not, shows why WWE seems to be hiding this history. By downplaying a $110 million sexual harassment lawsuit to a mere blur, the company attempts to sanitize one of the most contentious periods in its history. Sable's second run was a shadow of her first. The magic was gone. The controversial storyline with McMahon was her most significant angle, a testament to how much her return was defined by her past conflicts. But another far more real affair was brewing behind the scenes, one that would change her life forever. The real-life affair and a new beginning. While Sable's on-screen life was a fictional affair with Vince McMahon, her real life was about to be turned upside down by a genuine one. During her first run, she was married to Mark Miro, the man who brought her into the business. But by her 2003 return, their relationship was strained. Back on the road, Sable found herself in the orbit of a new, explosive force, a young powerhouse named Brock Lesnar. Lesnar was the next big thing, and he and Sable, who was 10 years his senior, began an extramarital affair. Mark Miro, who was home caring for their daughter, grew suspicious. In a candid interview on Steve Austin's podcast years later, Miro recounted the heartbreaking discovery. The phone calls from his wife became less frequent. His suspicion led him to check her voicemail, where he heard a message that confirmed his worst fears. His marriage was over. Miro has openly spoken about the devastation. He recalled thinking that when he found out who the other man was, he was going to physically confront him. Then he found out it was Brock Lesnar. As Miro humorously and painfully recounted, "Steve, this gives forgiveness a whole new meaning." He filed for divorce, which was finalized in 2004. Miro has since become a motivational speaker and states that he holds no animosity towards Sable or Lesnar, wishing them the best. The affair marked the final chapter of Sable's wrestling career. Her relationship with Lesnar became her central focus. In his autobiography, Death Clutch, Lesnar revealed he gave her an ultimatum. "If we want a relationship," he told her, "neither one of us can work for that company." We both know the long-term side effects of everything there. She agreed to give up her career for him. In August 2004, WWE announced that Sable had once again left, this time on good terms to spend time with her family. 2 years later, in 2006, Rena and Brock Lesnar were married. Erased from history? The legacy WWE wants to forget. After her 2004 departure, Sable vanished from the public eye. For a woman who was once one of the most recognizable faces in pop culture, her retreat into a private life was absolute. She settled down with Brock Lesnar on a farm in rural Saskatchewan, Canada, raising their 2 sons. She has never made another on-screen appearance for WWE. She doesn't do interviews. She has no social media. Even during Lesnar's many dominant returns to WWE, Sable has been conspicuously absent, rarely, if ever, even mentioned on commentary as his wife. This leads to the big question: why is Sable, one of the most influential female stars of the company's most successful era, seemingly erased from its history? Why isn't she in the WWE Hall of Fame when peers with arguably less impact have been inducted? The reasons are a complex mix of everything we've discussed. First, there's the lawsuit. Suing Vince McMahon for $110 million alleging sexual harassment is a bridge burner. Inducting her into the Hall of Fame means acknowledging the lawsuit and the culture that spawned it, something the company is clearly reluctant to do. Second, her backstage reputation for having an ego and not paying her dues left a lasting negative impression. The wrestling business has a long memory, and the resentment she generated still lingers in the minds of some veterans. Third, she left on her terms, not WWE's, both times. The first time she used a lawsuit to get out. The second time she chose a private life with Brock Lesnar over a public career. WWE prefers to honor those who have stayed loyal and accessible. Sable is the opposite of that. Finally, her legacy is complicated today. While a trailblazer, her character was rooted in the overt sexualization of the Attitude Era, a time of bikini contests and bra and panties matches. That clashes with the current, family-friendly, athletic-focused presentation of its female superstars. In the end, WWE isn't just hiding one moment. It's hiding the entire messy, complicated truth. It's hiding the story of a woman it didn't create, but merely discovered, who became more popular than anyone imagined. It's hiding the toxic culture she exposed and the shocking lawsuit that threatened to tear it all down. It's hiding the fact that she ultimately walked away from it all for good. Sable's story is an inconvenient truth, A reminder that behind the spectacle, there are real secrets the corporate history books will never tell you. His story of Sable is a whirlwind. From a model to a global icon in a few short years, her trajectory was unlike any other. She was a key ingredient in the chaotic cocktail that was the Attitude Era. But her journey is also a cautionary tale of how fame can breed resentment, how a toxic environment can poison success, and how a company built on crafting narratives will do whatever it takes to control its own story, even if it means erasing one of its brightest stars. Today, Rena Lesnar lives a quiet life, far from the roar of the crowd. Her legacy is undeniable, and legends like Mick Foley argue she absolutely deserves a place in the Hall of Fame. But as long as WWE seeks to bury the uncomfortable truths of its past, her plaque will likely remain absent. She is the ghost of the Attitude Era, a specter that reminds us of the true story behind the scripted drama. A story of fame, betrayal, and ultimately, escape. What do you think? Does Sable deserve to be in the WWE Hall of Fame? Or are the controversies just too much for WWE to ever acknowledge? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more deep dives into the stories wrestling companies don't want you to know. Thanks for watching.